Okay, so here's the second lesson in Chapter 6, and it's on slope fields. A slope field is a visual representation of the solution of a differential equation. Slope fields are a relatively new branch of calculus. When I was taking calculus, we did not have to do slope fields. What I want you to notice is that slope fields sort of gives you the pattern for the way the slopes run in a differential equation. Notice that this is dy dx. If we integrate dy dx, we get x squared, which is why my slope fields look like parabolas. However, if you notice, this is y equals, and y is the exact representation of what's there. Okay? Generally on the AP exam, you're going to be asked to match a slope field with an equation, and sometimes on a free response question, they will ask you to actually graph a slope field. It is relatively simple. It is so simple that you're going to think you're doing it wrong, but you're not. It's very simple. So here are the steps. The first thing you want to do is sort of create an x, y, dy, dx table, and then you're going to sketch a line segment estimating the slope. And notice it's an estimate. It's not actual, so don't get all hung up on whether or not you're doing it exactly right. It's an estimate. Okay? I'm going to ignore this table because I actually chose too many points, and I don't want to do that many points. I'm going to do like the 4 points in this area. But basically what you want to do is you want to take a point. Let's say this point is -1, 1. So I have the point x is -1, y is -1. So my formula is x minus y, and that gives me 0. So, no, I'm sorry. That would be this point. -1, -1. So I'll just start here. So -1, -1, my slope is 0, so I'd have a slope that looked like this. Okay? That's the slope of 0. So now I'm going to go to this point. This point is -1 minus 0, which is simply -1. And I'm using this formula, okay? So that tells me when x is -1 and y is 0, I have a slope of -1. And the slope of -1, an estimate of that would look like this. Okay? So now I'm going to go to this point. This point is x is -1, y is 1, and I get -2. So -2 is slightly steeper than -1, so I'm going to kind of draw it like that. Okay? So now let's do the next one. Here, this value, y is 1 and x is 0. So I have 0 minus 1. So these two have about the same slope, so when I draw them, I kind of want to make them parallel to each other as much as possible. If I take this point, both x and y are 0, so I get 0. If I take this point, x is 0 and y is -1, so I get -2. So it's going to be is that right? X is 0 and y is -1, so I don't know why I got -2. That's going to be +1. New math, +1. Okay? Here, x is 1 and y is -1. So that's going to give me about a 2, a +2. So it's going to be slightly steeper than this one. Here, x is 1 and y is 0, so this is going to be a slope of 1, so these two should be somewhat parallel. Here, x is 1 and y is 1, so I get a slope here of 0. And I can kind of see that there's a pattern, so if I wanted to extend this, I would see that all of these would be 0 and all of these would be 0. Okay, so I can kind of extend that pattern and kind of see what's going on. And that's basically how you do a slope field. I'm going to do a couple of others just so you can kind of get a feel for it. What I want you to notice in this one, notice that my x values are not affecting my slope field. So that means that all of my x values will have the same exact slope. So let's take this point. When x is -3, my slope, my dy dx would be -2. So I can just kind of estimate that all of these are going to be -2 at this point because y doesn't affect it. here, when x is negative 2, and I'm going to get negative 2 plus 1, which is negative 1, so now all of my slopes are going to be negative, even though I just drew them all positively. Sorry about that. So these should all be negative 2. And these should all be negative 1. Now again, this is not perfect. You just want to make sure that this is steeper than this one. All of these will be 0. And when I get here, all of these will be positive 1. And of course, these are going to be positive 2, so I'm going to make them a little bit steeper. And that's how you draw a slope field. Here, if you notice that now x does not affect my value. So if I take this where y is 2, then all of my slopes are going to be positive 4 on this line. So they're going to be really steep, positive slopes. So a positive 4 would almost look vertical in comparison. And they all would be the same. Then, of course, here, they would all be 2, positive 2. So I'm going to kind of draw that line down just a little bit more. And then, of course, all of them would be 0 here, because y is 0. And in the bottom, they would all be negative. So this would be negative 2. And what you notice, you see, is sort of like a sideways parabola, which makes sense because if I were to integrate that, I'd get y squared maybe. So, and again, this would be negative 4, so it would be even steeper. And that's how we draw a slope field. Okay, last one that I'm going to show you. Again, what you want to look for are your patterns. So as you're matching them, you want to think, okay, where is this going to be negative? This is going to be negative, let's say, when x is negative 1 and y is 1, I'm going to get a 0. I'm sorry, where's this going to be 0? So when x is negative 1 and y is 1, I'm going to get 0. Of course, I'm going to get 0 here, 0, 0. I'll get 0 at when x is negative 1, and I'm sorry, when y is negative 1 and x is 1, and the same thing for negative 2 and 2. So at my diagonals, I'm going to get 0, because it's kind of nice to see the patterns. Okay, so then I'll get at when x is 1 and when x is 0 and y is 1, okay, I'm going to get a slope of 1 here. When x is negative 1 and y is 0, I get a slope of negative 1 here. So this is y is 1. X is negative 1 and y is 0. X is negative 2 and y is 0, so this is going to be slightly steeper. And then this is going to be a slope of negative 3, so it's going to be even more steep. Here I'm going to get a slope of 1. And this is a slope of 2. It's a little bit steeper, and a slope of 3, steeper. Okay, here I'm going to get I'm just doing the easy ones, just to kind of give you a feel for what they look like. Here I have a y is 2 and x is 0, so I have a slope of 2. So it's going to be steeper than my slopes of 1. This would give me a slope of negative 1 and a slope of negative 2. So it's just a little bit steeper. And that's pretty much how you do a slope field. I know it seems sort of random, but yeah, it's kind of random. So here we have x is negative 1 and y is negative 1, so I get a slope of negative 2. It'll be a little bit steeper. Okay? And you try to just find the patterns and you just fill them in. I know that seems random, but that is slope fields in a nutshell. So stay tuned for the next lesson, which is, I think, another lesson on differential equations.